So I know I said in the last video that this video was definitely going to have some sewing, since we're on video 3 of a sewing series, but I started putting together this video and it started getting really long, so I decided to chop it up into a few more parts. So in this video we're focusing on cutting out our materials. So we went over all of the materials that I'll be using in my last video. You can go check that out if you need to. So I'm going to go over some of my preferred and favorite tools for cutting out bralette making materials. I am basically just going through cutting out all 10 bralettes, which gets a little tedious and boring at times, so a lot of it is definitely sped up and skipped over, but I do talk about how to mirror lace, when it's a good idea to cut on the fold and when it's a good idea to cut in a single layer, when it's convenient to use a scalloped edge lace, and when it's not necessary or not possible without modifying the pattern. There's a couple patterns where I do need to piece together the lace in order to actually like cover the whole pattern piece. I don't know. And so I do go over how to do that. And in general, it's just kind of a lot of waffling and, you know, shifting around pattern pieces, and you get to kind of see the whole process of cutting out the different bralettes. Where possible, I did try to limit myself to essentially the same quantities that I sell in my shop. For example, with the stretch tool, everything is sold as a 1/4 of a meter, so if you were to take kind of a meter of the fabric, the full width, I cut that into 4 pieces, and so I do use that piece. There are a couple bralettes, especially like the Sierra and the Wrap Bralette by Mood. The pieces are very long, and so I had to get a bit creative at times with which direction the pattern piece was going to be cut out in, and I don't know yet if that's going to bite me in the butt later on with the way that it stretches and things like that, but I didn't want to take advantage of the fact that I do have rolls and rolls of very wide tulle. I wanted to try to pretend like I was a home sewist with just a 1/4 meter of this stretch tulle. I did also have to be pretty stingy with my pattern placement because I'm making the matching panties for everything as well. But anyway, you know, hopefully you guys won't be as overambitious as I am and make 10 sets of lingerie at once, so your cutting out process should hopefully be a lot easier than mine was. A lot of these patterns do give cutting layouts and kind of say like, okay, you fold your fabric this way, you do this, that, lay out the pattern pieces like this, and so on. You don't have to follow them. The way that I'm cutting out my pattern pieces just goes to show how there are different ways that you can do everything. So anyway, let's get started. So these are some of my favorite tools to use when I'm cutting out lace and delicate fabrics for making bralettes. You'll recognize that some of these are pretty similar to what you would use when cutting out, you know, a normal kind of garment. So I've got a couple of rulers just in case I need to measure something or if I need a straight edge. I of course have very sharp fabric scissors. Usually when I'm making lingerie though, I like to use a rotary cutter better. I like the precision of it more, and of course I've got a cutting mat for that. I've got a teeny pair of snips in case I just need to, you know, cut a little piece of fabric. I have marking pens. I probably won't use these much for the bralettes just because it's kind of hard to use them on things like lace or mesh or tulle and stuff like that. I've got pins, of course, if I want to try to pin something in place, although typically I'll just use my pattern weights to kind of keep the lace and the paper pattern in place. And then this is probably the most unique one for lingerie projects. It's a temporary spray adhesive, and that's great for laying the lining and the lace together so that you can really make sure that they're the same size and that they don't shift around so much. The nice thing about this is that it will not leave a residue, so it washes out easily. It also kind of dissolves in the air. So it's also something that it's not going to last that long. Yeah, so when I'm cutting out, I mean, typically what I'll use, I'll end up using these. The pins are mostly for marking things like darts and that sort of stuff. Of course, I've got my pattern weights as well. I'm not going to worry too much about mirroring the lace on the Sierra because it is such a long piece that I don't think it's going to be easy to tell if they're not mirrored exactly right. So I'll cut out one piece like this, and then flip this piece over and cut one piece like that. See, I'm lining it up with this scalloped edge down here. This one does say to cut one, but when looking at the instructions, Madeline does say you need one full piece, but actually the pattern piece is cut on the fold, but she doesn't want you to cut the entire piece on the fold. So actually you're supposed to flip it and mirror it. There's the back. And now we've got the lining. So this is just a 1/4 meter of stretch tulle, and I'm just pulling it both ways to see which is the direction of greatest stretch. Just fits. I think depending on how stretchy your material is, you could turn it the other way if, you know, for a piece like this and for a piece that's this long. I mean, this is definitely an outlier for the bralette patterns with how long the pattern piece is. I think if I didn't have enough width this way, which is the stretchier side, I could have turned it and it still would have been okay, because this is a fairly stretchy material in both directions. So I think I still would have gotten, it's still within the recommended stretch percentage for how this pattern was drafted, and it probably still would have fit. And you can also use the fabric spray as well if you want to adhere the lace to the lining while you're still cutting it out. I'm going to use it once I start sewing, just to kind of keep them all together. We've got Noelle. So we've got our lace, we've got our pieces. So the Noelle is quite a big bra. It's got like a very high neck, a racer back design, and a lot of laces aren't going to be wide enough. And so what we're going to do is kind of piece together the lace to form the bigger pattern piece. For my own preference, I'm just lining up that design so that it's right in the middle. It's not really a very centered design, so yeah, I'm just kind of choosing where I want it to fall. Now for this one, you can see it says cut one unfold, and I went ahead and I just doubled the pattern piece so that I don't have to deal with the flipping over. I just have one single pattern piece. I guess this makes it easier for the pattern designer. You know, you don't have to take up so much paper space, and people kind of have a choice of how they want to cut out the design, cut out the pattern. But for me, this was just most convenient. And I've made it previously, so this is just what I did before. I am going to cut off the scallops because we do have a band that attaches down here. And now I just kind of need a piece, and so I've just got a little scrap here. Just deciding kind of how I want it to go. I'm just gonna stick a couple pins in here to remind myself of how that's going to attach. And then for the opposite side, I am just grabbing this little scallop piece here. I don't think you have to be too exact when doing this part because it's pretty busy anyway, and like this part will get folded over to attach the strap, so I'm just winging it mostly. You guys haven't noticed yet, I do that fairly often with my sewing. And even with the pinning now, I'm not trying to be precise, I'm just trying to make sure that these little pieces stick together and that I don't accidentally throw out little pieces that I intended to be part of the garment. For the back, I'm not feeling very concerned again about the whole placement of the lace, but I do want it kind of between this scallop, and we're going to do the same thing. So this is actually a great pattern for other types of materials too, so you don't have to use a scalloped lace, or if you have one that's only one-sided, you don't have to use a scalloped lace for this because there's not actually an edge to use it. There's probably ways to adapt the pattern so that you could show off a scalloped edge, but this would be great for kind of like an all-over lace fabric, or scuba, knit, mesh. You know, I have some great printed stretch mesh in the shop. You could use that. It's just kind of a great big surface for you to show off really nice looking materials. Alright, so we've got the back piece, and then these two are both on the fold. Alright, so we've got that one. Also lay out the front band and the back band. Moving on. So this is one of two that's just using knit fabric, and so here I've just got some scrap. Look for my direction of greatest stretch. Both of these pieces are cut on the fold. So there's one piece. Alright. And this one's really that simple. Ta-da! So we've got Rosie. So this one's pretty easy. We have two pieces. And so I've got this black lace and some ivory tulle. I can see there's arrows on here kind of indicating the grain line. Actually, I'm not sure if it's the direction of greatest stretch or not. So I'll line them up as the direction of greatest stretch. So I wanted to use this lace and take advantage of the scalloped edge just because it's really pretty. It's got these eyelash details on there. So in order to do that, I'm going to be modifying this slightly. So rather than going all the way up to that edge, I'm going to kind of place it a bit further off. And so I want that high point of the scallop to be at the top. And I'm gonna just kind of eyeball it a bit. I want the lace to kind of go like that on the cup. And so I'll start out with, okay, let's see. I'm gonna cut this and then I'm going to use that as like my pattern piece to kind of make sure that I'm getting an exact copy of the lace on the other side. Now to mirror the lace and to get exactly the same pattern on the other side, I'm going to flip it over and then I'm going to look for that kind of same detail. It's kind of hard to see, but I've got this flower here and here it is. Let's see if I can fit it down here. And so now I have two pieces that are exactly the same on either side. And then I'll just do the same thing for the front cup. And so I'll flip it over. And so there we go. It's kind of two perfectly mirrored cup pieces. Ta-da! Okay, so next we have the Mila bralette. And so for this one, I have this really gorgeous wide black lace with this gigantic border print on the bottom here, and I really want to make use of that because the Mila has this lower band and I really just want to make use of that beautiful scalloped edge there. It's going to be interesting to kind of figure out how to apply that. And so for the main cup pieces, I'm going to try to make more use of this top kind of Swiss dot looking mesh part. So it has the grain line kind of going up and down. I mean, I think I would rather that it goes this way, 'cause the stretch should generally go around the body, but what I've noticed with Moods patterns is they're more, like the techniques that they use and the markings is more for kind of regular dressmaking, so this is probably the grain line of the fabric but not the direction of the greatest stretch, which is typically what you see with lingerie patterns. And I can notice down here that it does say to cut on the fold. Like, I'm gonna do my best to line up the motifs so that maybe I can get something that's nicely centered. And I can see there are little marks on the pattern for notches, so I'm just gonna go in there. You definitely want to be careful because the seam allowances are so small on these patterns. You don't want to snip past the seam allowance and then have it get into your actual bra. This also needs a couple. This is for the lining as well. So, one thing I noticed, I'm not going to be able to cut this on the fold going in the direction of greatest stretch. So I'm going to take a chance. If I really didn't have enough space, what I could have done is just cut two of these, but extended it just a bit by about 1/4 inch for the seam allowance, and just added a seam right there. And then since this is the direction of greatest stretch, I'll just add that piece over top. And then it will have this ruffle and also the lace going along the straps in the back. Okay, so next we have the Mood wrap style bralette. This one is pretty similar to the Sierra wrap front bralette, and also it's similar to the Noel in that the piece of lace that I have is not wide enough to cover this whole piece. It is a pretty broad pattern piece. So I'm just going to line it up on the lace as usual, and then kind of do the same thing that I did before with the Noel, where I have to kind of piece the lace together to get the full pattern piece. With this one I did line up that bottom edge with the scalloped edge because it's going to kind of be visible there. I mean, all of this is pretty straightforward. One thing that I do wish that I had done differently, you can see that I'm using the center of this lace for that back piece, and I do wish that I had kept the scalloped edge for that as well, because obviously I wasn't thinking of this, but you know, the scalloped edge goes all the way around the whole bottom of the bra. And so here I go again with putting the lace on top of the pattern so I can get an idea of how much lace I need to kind of complete that whole piece. And I wanted to take advantage of that kind of border going around the lace because it kind of blends in really easily with each other, and then just pinning it in place so that I don't lose that piece. And obviously I do exactly the same for the other side as well. And then everything's pretty straightforward with the lining. I'm using the pink stretch tool. You can see the lighting is changing in my room. Not really a whole lot special about this. Since there isn't really a right and a wrong side with the lining fabric that I'm using, I don't always have to worry about, you know, flipping everything upside down and such. So next is the Darcy bralette by Mood. And this is kind of a big crop top style bralette. Everything with this is pretty straightforward. These are the band pieces and they are cut on the fold. With the actual cup pieces, I did decide that I wanted to mirror the lace, and so after I cut out the pieces I do flip them over so that I can get that kind of symmetrical design on the lace cups. Although it is a pretty busy lace design, so I probably didn't have to, but I decided to anyway. And cutting out the lining, again, pretty straightforward, a lot of stuff on the fold. I did have to play a bit of pattern Tetris. I really wanted to make sure that I wasn't using too much, and so yeah, you can see me kind of wiggling everything around to get it to fit properly. Next is the Raquel bralette by Madeline. I would say this one probably confused me the most. The pieces don't really look that obvious about how they will all go together. I mean, they're very rectangular, but there are slight curves to everything. And so I did have to kind of edit out a lot of me kind of waffling around. I am mirroring the lace. There's like a lace piece that goes on the top of the cup and then like a lace ruffle that goes around the bottom edge of the bra. And so you can see me kind of moving around the lace pieces. And the biggest downside to mirroring your lace is that it often means that you do not preserve fabric as well as if you were just kind of looking to place the pattern pieces where they fit most effectively. One thing that did kind of put me at a disadvantage, and you can see me kind of getting confused with the pieces, is that because I used the stretch tool as the main fabric and the lining, it just kind of got me a little mixed up about how many of each piece I needed to cut, and also my camera died during the cutting out for that. Next is the Barrett bralette, also by Madeline. For this one I'm only using the tulle lining for everything. And the last one is the Lovesick bralette by George and Ginger Patterns, and this is the second one that uses all knit fabric, so I mean it's very straightforward, cutting on the fold, racing against the sunshine that is coming into my studio. it's pretty much just making sure that you get the grain line right. Other than that, you know, you just cut out all the pieces and you're good to go. And that's it. All 10 of them are finally cut out. And then in the next video, I swear we are actually going to do some sewing. So stick around for that. If you haven't yet subscribed, please do so. And, you know, like this video if you did. And comment below if you have any questions or comments for me. And I will see you next time. Bye, guys.